So whilst we're on the subject of Brexit, I think we need to talk about what happened earlier today. That there were secret cross-party talks around the issues of the quote-unquote failures of Brexit, which had people from multiple different parties, multiple different positions on Brexit, having secret discussions, although they're not so secret now that they've been put out in the open, about how to deal with the fact that Brexit's going really, really poorly. Now, I'll tell you the main reason why Brexit's going badly is because we put in charge a fucking clown to try and sort this out in the first place in the form of Boris Johnson, who we know, and as I've said many times on the stream, but no one talks about it, so I'm going to repeat it again for the 1000th time, is that the reason why we're having a problem with the Northern Ireland Protocol is because it was only put into the Conservative manifesto as a stopgap to try and find a solution later to be able to promote the fact that Boris Johnson had an oven-ready deal, which he didn't have. It was all a lie. Ian Paisley Jr. was on Channel 4 News. He was told by Boris Johnson that it was going to be a lie and they always planned to scrap the Northern Ireland Protocol. It was never ever the official ending position and they were going to renegotiate it anyway, and the deal was never ever 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 oven ready in the slightest. It was all a fucking lie. And now we're in this continual Brexit impasse where the issue never actually gets solved because it was done in a slapdash and incomplete manner to try and win an election. So that's the reason why we're in the shit that we are. That, and of course, so much of the Brexit is being done to try and further this small state, sweatshop of Europe style, car crash capitalism economy that people on the right of the Conservative Party and the ERG want to have. So I've got an article about this which we can have a read of, and then I've got a video to watch by pro-Brexit YouTuber MyR2C, who I've never actually covered on the channel before, but I think it'd be interesting to see his perspective, as he is one of the very few genuine grassroots commentators on the right in this country. He's not being astroturfed at all, and apparently he runs his entire channel off of member donations and from ad revenue. So it'd be interesting to see his opinions on this. But let me bring up this article first of all. A two-day gathering attended by Michael Gove and high-ranking members of Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet was held at Dishley Park in Oxfordshire on Thursday and Friday after the early weeks of 2023 have seen the dim state of Britain's economy laid bare. Politicians from both sides of the Brexit debate held talks with diplomats, defence experts and leading figures from the business and banking worlds, as officials acknowledged leaving the EU had damaged the UK's prospects amid stymied growth. It's interesting that, just like in Parliament, it's a bunch of business leaders and bankers and politicians and establishment stooges all having this discussion. Public don't get a say in there. It's being done outside of the public recourse. In the same way that happens with all the rest of the way in which policies that get put forward to us by political parties are done. It's all done by the whim of donors, at the whim of businessmen, at the whim of bankers, etc., etc. That we never have any diplomatic process on any of this. And because what happens when we do get to vote on what kind of Brexit we want, we get an actual Brexit that was a lie. We were lied to by the Conservative Party, as I mentioned before, about the quote-unquote oven-ready deal. So this is why we're in the position that we're in. And then they're also trying to fix the issues behind the scenes, especially when considering the right-wing view of the issue of Brexit is this idea. They have this kind of, we saw with Nigel Farage debating John Bercow, that they believe there's some kind of left-wing establishment, anti-growth fifth column at the centre of British politics, trying to make Brexit fail from the inside, to remove them from being able to have this quote-unquote bonfire of EU regulations that they want to have. So there being secret Brexit talks with a bunch of rich people and politicians all coming together to undermine the elected proposals that backed Brexit is a really bad look, especially if you're somebody who does want to see some of this stuff rearranged. To see it rearranged without a democratic mandate is a really poor form, because it just shows, again, how so many of the quote-unquote Remainer types do genuinely believe they should be able to undemocratically reverse all of the stuff that people actually voted on for a democratic mandate to sort out Brexit, so to speak. Incredibly frustrating, because we could, go back to the public and have a general election about this stuff. But instead, we're having a collusion of people behind the scenes when there's already conspiracy theories going on with the weird right-wing pro-libertarian style Brexit people they already think that the deep state is out to get them, and this does nothing to try and disabuse people of these facts. They genuinely still think that they are somehow the silent majority who are all really pro-Brexit and pro, hard Brexit, when actually when you look at the polling, it really isn't truth. And until we have an election about that, they are not going to see the light on this particular issue until there's a democratic mandate the other way. According to documents obtained by The Observer, which has first reported the meetings, the summit has described as a private discussion under the title, How Can We Make Brexit Better Work Without Neighbours in Europe? Attendees from the pro-Brexit camp in Westminster are said to include former party leader Michael Howard, former Chancellor Norman Lamont, and former Labour Europe Minister Gisela Stewart, a leading figure of the Leave campaign. Remainers at the summit included Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy, Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey, and former European Commission Labour Cabinet Minister and friend of Jeffrey Epstein, Peter Mandelson, who acted as chair. Tory ex-Minister for Europe David Lidlington was also said to be there. Non-political attendees included the chair of the pharmaceutical company GlaxoSmithKline, so literally Big Pharma, Oliver Robbins from fucking Goldman Sachs. We literally have Big Pharma bankers, Treasury Permanent Secretaries, and a NATO Assistant Secretary General. So yeah, we've got a bunch of behind-the-scenes politicians. We've got people from Big Pharma, people from big banks, and people from NATO. This is... I hate to sound like a fucking rightoid conspiracy theorist. This is the deep state. I'm sorry, but if there is ever a rightoid conspiracy theory that frustratingly would have some merit if they understood the material analysis that goes into this, this is unironically what they would refer to as the deep state. And what we would call on the left, we would just call hegemonic capitalism. Like we would call the hegemonic centre of power within capitalism, the influences, the policies that get pushed by the state behind the scenes outside of the democratic process. Obviously, leftists will look at this and say, well, why are big pharma and banks getting involved? It's because they have financial interests. It's as simple as that. Because that's what the profit motive will do. They want to get involved in politics and lobby and be behind the scenes dictating policy because they want to make sure they get the best financial returns for this at the end of the day. That's it. Whereas rightoids, who don't understand material analysis, will continually just go down conspiracy rabbit holes in that they just want to hurt Brexit because they're part of the establishment, and that means they must propose Brexit, and we have no understanding as to why they would do this. It doesn't make any sense what they are proposing about this, but it's so frustrating. They're so close. They're so close to getting the reason why these things happen. Yet they can't see the wood for the trees because they fundamentally have a genuine belief in the efficacy of capitalism. When this is capitalism, the state being beholden to financial interest is literally how capitalism fucking works. If you don't think that's how that works, where it's just crony capitalism, then you live in a fantasy world. All capitalism becomes crony capitalism at the end of the day. Introductory statement. Attendees heard there was now a view amongst some, at least, that so far the UK has not yet found its way forward outside the EU, with Brexit acting as a drag on our growth and inhibiting the UK's potential. And the thing is that this is true, but a lot of right-leaning people will tell you that those can only be attributed to some kind of fifth columnist. A source who was there told the paper it was a constructive meeting that addressed the problems and opportunities of Brexit, but never strayed far from the economic liabilities the UK faces at the time of global instability and soaring costs of living. Michael Gove, who co-led Vote Leave in 2016 with Boris Johnson, has said to have been heavily involved in the talks, and despite still believing Brexit would eventually prove to be the right decision, was honest about the difficulties of Britain's first 3 years outside the EU. So I mean, it is interesting that someone who was literally part of the Vote Leave campaign, who should be one of the people at the top of the poll as far as it comes to the pro-Brexit side of the argument, if you're a right-winger who genuinely thinks this is a deep state conspiracy, and for some reason you're watching my tiny left-wing channel for no reason, if even Michael Gove is admitting things are at fault and they need to change, this should show you it's not an establishment plot. It is just the fact that there are parts of Brexit, whether or not you agree with which parts of it is, there are at least some parts that are not going the way that they should be, and that something needs to change. This isn't Mr. Lefty. This is Michael Gove, who still believes in Brexit, who was the chair of the Vote Leave, co-led the Vote Leave campaign. This is Mr. Brexit numero uno, outside of Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, right? Literally at the top of the pile for being part of the Brexit negotiations, or the Brexit campaign to be able to leave, and giving us the positive visions, quote unquote, that Brexit should theoretically give us by now. I'm telling you, the reason why Big Pharma and big banks are involved in this is because they want to make money. That's the only reason why they're there. It's not a big conspiracy. It's just how capitalism works, okay? People with lots of money want to use their money to give the leverage that they need to be able to make more money and protect their business interests down the line. That's why they're there. That's why they're in the talks. I personally, have a axiomatic belief in democracy. That's why I'm a socialist. That's why I want democracy to spread to the workplace as well. I think that it's bad that the democratic will of the people is being undermined by secretive talks behind the scenes with people from moneyed interests. I genuinely think that that's really bad. But fundamentally, the things that they are saying is correct. But what needs to happen is this needs to go to the people on some kind of public democratic vote, whether it be a new general election, whether it would be a new referendum based upon the Brexit deal that we want to see. There needs to be some kind of democratic mandate, which for this there isn't, because this is happening behind the scenes. I fully agree with you that it's bad that's being done behind the scenes, but this doesn't necessarily indicate a fifth column, and it also does not necessarily indicate that the things and the prescriptions that they're making about the economic harms of Brexit are wrong. That's the important point. The main thrust of it was that Britain is losing out, that Brexit is not delivering, our economy is in a weak position, said the source. It was about moving on from Leave and Remain and what are the issues we now have to face, and how can we get into the best position in order to have a conversation about the EU with the EU about changes to the UK-EU trade and cooperation agreement when that happens. So it was held at a moment when we came close to recession. Ministers are still locked in talks over the Northern Ireland Protocol, while easing the crisis of small boats across the English Channel requires close cooperation with France and the wider EU, which is true, right? The reason why we have a small boat crisis is because of hard Brexit. It's been shown that that's the reason why now. We're outside of the Dublin Protocol, all that kind of stuff. And there are no relationships that we have with France for them to be able to deal with it until we have an actual agreement on processing asylum claims in Calais, which is the big issue we have. There is a backlog of applications in Calais, and that's why people are going on the small boats. It's literally a function of the ridiculous hard Brexit that we've done, which needs more diplomatic investigation into. That's absolutely the case. And the frustrating thing is the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Northern Ireland Protocol is only an issue because the DUP have known, right? And the Brexiteers know. The Northern Ireland Protocol undermines the quote-unquote economic benefits of Brexit because the benefits of remaining in the single market have shown to be giving the Northern Ireland economy a bigger boost than we're getting in the United Kingdom. The fact they still have access to the single market has shown that it's been much more beneficial for Northern Ireland would be than if they left. This is why the Alliance and why Sinn Féin and why the UUP all support the Northern Ireland Protocol, because they want to ensure...
A communist.
Thank you for joining the stream, Felikins. Welcome. The reason why these Northern Ireland parties support the protocol is because they understand the financial benefits that Northern Ireland gets from remaining inside the European single market. Even Sinn Féin, who are a Eurosceptic party, remember, these are democratic socialists in Sinn Féin. The only reason why they are supporting the current Northern Ireland Protocol is because they are being pragmatic about the utility they gain from access to the single market, the fact that access to the single market and customs union sorts out the border issue to maintain the Good Friday Agreement. Let's not forget, that's a massive issue in Northern Ireland. And the entirety of Boris Johnson's Brexit deal has been done without any care for the integrity of the Good Friday Agreement. And that's the problem that we have. And again, it's exactly why Sinn Féin and a bunch of the other parties in Northern Ireland all still support the existence of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And the only reason why they want to scrap it is because the DUP want Brexit to be a success, despite the fact that they know that they're not going to get any actual success out of Brexit. It's incredibly frustrating. So yeah, that is the long and short of what's happening with the talks. But as I said, whilst I have my issues with these talks happening and the way in which that they're happening, what I am more interested in is how the right wing are going to react to this. I said that they were going to have a lot of them are going to be conspiracy brains about the way this is happening. I'm like, it's not a conspiracy, it's just how capitalism works. So get with the program, understand how material analysis works. But I do think that what is happening is bad, and it's not being done democratically. So we're going to watch my R2C's discussion about this issue, and I want to react to how the right wing is handling this issue.
There was a secret 2-day summit a couple of days ago to discuss Brexit failings between EU rejoiners, Sir Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet, and Michael Gove. Still waiting for the media outrage on this story that we heard yesterday and today actually came out mostly. I'm going to give them some time. The media are usually behind us when it comes to developments like this, but this is a serious matter. We still don't know the full details, by the way, but there was a 2-day summit a couple of days ago in Ditchley Park, and this secret cross-party meeting or conference was held to challenge Brexit. The idea was initially to discuss Brexit because it's failing, because Brexit Britain isn't working. So we have to have new ideas.
I mean, yeah, they weren't trying to stop Brexit. They were having issues with the way in which Brexit was being implemented. That was the issue. It's nothing to do with anything specific about trying to make sure Brexit doesn't happen. And in fact, as we saw in the article that we just read, even the people who were on there who were pro-Remain didn't believe in ending Brexit, but trying to find ways of mitigating the economic harm that's being done because of the current Brexit deals and negotiations we've done so far. There was nothing about stopping Brexit, it's about changing the deals that we're having and the relationships we have with the European Union, etc.
To get a new relationship with the European Union. So far, not surprising, because the people who were attending this event were either EU rejoiners, the people from the financial establishment, the whole of the cabal of the anti-Brexit idiots, and somehow some of the senior figures from the government, the same government that claims to be pro-Brexit. Okay.
Well, yeah, that's because there were multiple people from... The whole point about this was supposed to be cross-party and cross-ideology. It was supposed to be about different people from different points of view coming together to find some kind of happy medium. And I think there's, I disagree with how it's being done. It should be done publicly, and there should be some kind of democratic accountability for the ways in which policy may or may not change in the future. But the fact that it's being done as some kind of compromise is a good thing, because we know, the fact that when the referendum was held, it was a close result, so it should be implemented. We should be leaving the European Union, but there should be some kind of compromise of what the deal looks like. 52% does not give you a mandate for the hardest of Brexits, especially when a lot of the discussion going up to the referendum was way outside of the realm of hard Brexit or whatever. There should be some kind of compromise, especially now that the opinions of the public have changed towards staying in the European Union. So there does need to be some kind of push-pull on the kind of deal that we get based upon what each camp thinks about the issue of the Brexit deal. So the fact that there are people from each side should show you that it's not about some deep state conspiracy with the establishment to try and reverse Brexit. That should show you that it's far more likely to be about some kind of pragmatic solution.
Let's see. Michael Gove was alongside people like David Lammy and some of the worst people that we have when it comes to Brexit got together. This 2-day gathering of some of country's most senior Labour and Tory politicians was to address Brexit failings, together with diplomats, defence experts, and the heads of some of the biggest businesses and banks. This was held at Ditchley Park. Now, one of the interesting things about the sort of people who attended this summit was you had non-political attendees like John Simmons, who is the chair of the pharmaceutical firm GSK. You had Ollie Robbins. Do you remember Ollie Robbins? He's currently the Goldman Sachs managing director, but before he was Theresa May's Brexit negotiator, the guy who was trying to mess up Brexit, and he did mess up Brexit. The guy who created the idea of backstop with the Northern Ireland, that area. So this guy, alongside John Simmons, and you had Tom Scholar, who's a former Treasury Permanent Secretary, senior civil servant.
But also, you've not given any justification as to why the backstop was being done to try and thwart Brexit. Like, maybe I'm just out of the loop as somebody who's not been paid attention to pro-Brexit arguments on this one, but I don't get how the Northern Ireland backstop, it was done trying and thwart Brexit. The whole point of it was to try and ensure the integrity of the Good Friday Agreement. If people on the pro-Brexit side are so lost in the source, they don't understand how the unilateral leaving of the EU and all of the single market and everything that comes with it does threaten the integrity of the Good Friday Agreement, can spark war across the island of Ireland, then I really have no idea what planet you guys are living on at this point.
You had Angus Lapsley, who's a NATO Assistant Secretary General for Defence and Policy and Planning. All these guys got together to basically say that, okay, Brexit clearly is not a good idea, and we need to rethink the whole thing. And they also...
They didn't say that Brexit was necessarily a good idea. There are people from both sides of the discussion on this, but they think that the current Brexit deal and Brexit plan was bad. So this is a pretty disingenuous framing of what was happening. I can't believe I'm fucking defending. I'm defending people I really absolutely hate. Like, literally, I'm defending friend of Jeffrey Epstein, Peter Mandelson, Michael Gove, and people from Big Pharma and Goldman Sachs. What has happened to my life? I'm defending these people because the attacks on them are so stupid and so completely not based in reality.
Invited people like Michael Gove. So let's try to analyze this. Michael Gove and those guys going ahead with it, with this summit, could either be one of these two things. One is classic Michael Gove. You can't trust him. He's just doing whatever he's doing for his own agenda and his own ideology. Two, it could be, I really hope that the second one is true, but I don't think. The second scenario could be that they created this summit and they said, everybody's coming, it's cross-party, Mr. Gove and others, you should actually come because we are being neutral, we are actually being impartial, we want to help Brexit Britain. So they tricked him into going there.
This is a very Tim Pool way of discussing this issue here, where he spent the entirety of the video for 3.5 minutes up to this point framing this as, there's this thing where they're trying to stop Brexit. Guys, the deep state stopping Brexit, what the fuck is going on? This is the establishment have come in to try and ruin everything. And then just before the end of the video, he goes, well, it also might be what I said it was about it being cross-party talks to make Brexit work better. So he's actually spent the 75% of this video framing it like Tim Pool would do in the most kind of abrasive and catastrophizing way possible, and then pulls it back down to, well, actually, there might be this more reasonable explanation right at the end of the video when most people would have stopped watching. So, yeah, it's really disingenuous. I mean, Timber on Toast described this as being the loud idiot and then whispering sensible person way of formulating your political videos to give you just enough plausible deniability to be able to make an inflammatory statement by couching it at the end with a, well, actually, this reasonable explanation might also be true, but only at the end and not as much of your analysis as the remainder of your what other thing you were saying was.
And then the whole thing, even though it was a secret summit, it got leaked to the press. So why would you leak it? So again, it could either be Michael Gove being a snake, or it could be Michael Gove being an idiot who got tricked into it. But we know that he's a smart man.
Okay, so it is entirely within the framing of it's all about stopping Brexit. But the only reason why Michael Gove might be engaging in it is because he's been tricked by the anti-Brexit establishment. And it's not actually about that. It's he's not even entertained the idea that maybe all of these talks are genuinely being done in good faith. I mean, there is reasonable criticism to be had about the fact that if you are meeting with people like Big Pharma and Goldman Sachs, then you might not even be there in good faith. That might well be true, but it's not even entertain that as a possibility. It's really, really strange framing on this particular issue. Again, because the vast majority of these Brexit people do genuinely believe there's an anti-Brexit conspiracy going on from the establishment. And I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret too. The whole of the Brexit debate was entirely about the establishment. It was massive corporations and big businesses on one side who did a lot of trading with the European Union, who wanted to ensure that we didn't leave the European Union to make sure their trades happen better. A lot of big businesses who don't do that, who are much better within Britain's shores, who want to have a low tax, low regulation economy to be able to make lots of money and be able to suppress workers' rights. On the other side, who don't do any trading. Why do you think Wetherspoons were so pro-Brexit? Because they don't trade with the European market. They're a massive company that only operates within the UK, and they actually. There's a lot of stories about how Wetherspoons and how their procurement methods are actually ruining local breweries in England and in the rest of Britain and the UK as well, by using a lot of their political capital to try, and their economic capital, to rip off brewers by only getting bottom dollar prices, because they've essentially cornered the pub market because of their large market share. And they want to maintain that position at the top of the pub hierarchy in this country and try and shut out all the business by making sure that Brexit goes in a hard fashion to try and make a bonfire of antitrust legislation, anti-monopoly legislation in this country, and be able to get favourable market conditions to continue monopolising that part of the industry. And the European and all of the pro-EU stuff that was going on at the same time, that was all establishment stuff too.
Fucking neoliberalism.
Hey, thank you for the gifted sub again to Legeno9, much appreciated. So there was always the entirety of the Leave Remain debate that was happening was an establishment
Fucking
point of view,
neoliberalism.
and the gifted sub to Deletion Quarter as well. So this claim that there was a pro-establishment Remain camp and an anti-establishment Leave camp is completely nonsensical. In the same way that big businesses did stand to gain from either of these options, depending on what their particular economic needs were. This is why the RMT made official complaints to the Electoral Commission that left Leave as a political and campaigning bloc was not being given any kind of official electoral funds by the Electoral Commission to make a left-wing case for Brexit. Because there was a left-wing case for Brexit, which Mick Lynch has talked about a lot of the time, about how they wanted to have a left-leaning Brexit negotiation and Brexit policy platform to keep all the workers' rights, not be the bottom, race to the bottom on taxation and regulation in Europe and be the sweatshop of Europe position that a lot of people want on the right, but to use it to be able to get out of the competition clauses within the European trading agreements and European economic agreements and treaties to make the case for nationalisation, possibly without compensation. And by extricating ourselves from EU rules, they thought that would be a good plan. I have some issues with that, and I think my particular support of remaining in the European Union was a pragmatic one based on the fact that there was no proper left-wing case that was being made. That just shows that there is plenty of left-wing populist viewpoints that do support Brexit, but they were never given the time of day. In the same way that there are Remain arguments on both sides too. And it's frustrating to me that Remain and Leave and on the Brexit debate is becoming polarised between different ends of the economic political spectrum when it really shouldn't be something that is a left-right divide on this particular issue. It's very frustrating.
Man. So it's not easy to trick someone like Michael Gove. So that one of my problems is about senior figures from the Tory party going there. The other problem I have is, again, you are inviting a group of elite people from corporations and other political institutions like NATO and others and the Treasury to come together, get together in a meeting room and decide for the rest of us in the country.
Let's talk about the bookshelf.
I mean, it is a really strange bookshelf. What books does he have on there? Can't even see. One of them's by Cameron. It's that Cameron's autobiography, and then The EU in a Nutshell. Short History of the Crown. And who is it he's got there on the bust? I have no idea. I hate the way those FBP blue tick wankers made out the EU had no problem with nationalisation when it's clearly geared towards maintaining a neoliberal trade bloc. I mean, it is true that it's very frustrating that even James O'Brien in the debate he had with Mick Lynch and LBC wouldn't accept Mick Lynch's viewpoint around the issues with the European economic treaties around nationalisation and things like that. My point of view on this one actually is that I think I agree with Mélenchon and Zizek on this particular issue, in that taking yourself out of a lot of the economic treaties involved with the EU membership is a good thing. But you can maintain your membership of the European Union for political and diplomatic reasons. Zizek made a good point in that the problems that are going to face the world coming forward in the very near future are global problems. They're not going to be solved on an individual basis, and big diplomatic blocs like the European Union are necessary in combating these issues. And being outside of them so you can't fight for reform from within is not a place that you want to be. And I think I buy that argument from Zizek, even though you're right, Deletion Quarter, it is a neoliberal trade bloc that they want to be able to keep together. I think it's a very unfortunate necessary evil, especially in a world where every single argument for Brexit was being made by right-wingers at the time. As a result of the Electoral Commission's decision to only there be one official Leave campaign that was run on a very, very right-wing platform. But you can still, and Mélenchon was very clear in his policy towards the European Union is that he didn't want to leave, but he would actually just completely ignore a lot of the EU treaties around economics, if not leave those EU treaties. And I think that is the correct position for left-wingers to take in regards to the EU. In fact, in a world outside post-Brexit, the EU has gotten a lot better on a lot of the issues that I had a lot of I thought the EU made a lot of unfortunate decisions, but the way that they've been attacking monopolies, the way they've been trying to fine companies who try and engage in monopolism, the EU using its power as a democratic bloc to attack corporations. Actually, it's been. I was surprised the way in which corporates have been attacked by the European Union's position on economically in a way that I never expected them to. Like Margrethe Vestager, who was a finance minister from Denmark, I think it was, she's doled out tens of billions of euros in fines to big corporations, and she's done a good job. And I think that, it's the way Europe is going, it's getting more right-wing over time, and I find that frustrating. But if you do what Mélenchon does, I think you can make a good left-wing case for staying in the European Union. I think Mélenchon has the right idea on this one. And actually, the European Central Bank has been good during the COVID crisis. Like, the power the European Union used to try and ensure that there was a unitary energy policy in the Eurozone area to keep energy prices affordable, I think was a really good plan, which is frustrating because I disagree with a lot of the premises behind the European Union, because it doesn't quite work out in some areas in practice in that way. And being outside of it, we're just getting the worst. We're getting the worst of both worlds at the moment. But yeah, the thing is, it's sad because Tusi is absolutely 100% correct that these talks happening behind closed doors, being done by big pharma and big corporations, and not even Peter Mandelson's not a fucking MP. He's just an ex-advisor at this point who hangs around with Jeffrey Epstein. That's my third reference to Peter Mandelson's links to Epstein in this stream so far. And he's right to make this issue. It's just fundamentally, the right do not understand how material analysis works, and they think that it's a cabal of evil people doing evil things rather than people being driven by their material interests. And I will continually lose my mind with right-wingers and liberals on that particular issue forever. Until my dying day, I will be frustrated with liberals' inability to engage in material analysis.